You think power announces itself. It doesn't. It whispers, waits, then strikes. I speak to you from a room where noise is weakness, where every sound is weighed like currency. I've walked through betrayals you wouldn't name out loud, where every smile carried a blade and every promise hid a trap. You've been there too, haven't you? The room full of glances, the whispers you weren't supposed to hear, the way a single raised eyebrow can feel like a verdict. That's where I learned silence. Not the soft, polite kind, the hard kind that seals your mouth even when your lungs burn to confess, the kind that makes people lean closer, searching for cracks and finding only shadow. It's here, in this discipline, that the first crack of my illusions began. There was a woman, there always is. She moved like still water, no noise, no warning, no ripples. Her manipulation wasn't obvious. It was patient, practiced. She let me believe I was leading while she mapped every move I made. My naive trust was her favorite instrument. I mistook patience for loyalty, and that mistake cost me more than words can carry. So I learned my first law. Never fight where you can vanish instead. Never show your hand when silence can starve the battlefield. You may think strategy is a blade, something sharp and visible. It isn't. Strategy is absence. It's letting the other side exhaust themselves striking at a ghost. It's making your withdrawal look like defeat, while inside you're building distance, clarity, leverage. When I stopped reacting, she lost her script. When I stopped explaining, she lost her hold. In the absence of my noise, she heard herself, and it scared her. That was my first glimpse of real power, not in speaking, but in withholding. Not in striking, but in waiting for the perfect opening. And now, I offer you the same entry point. Forget the theater of strength. Forget the performance. Build your power in shadows, in withheld words, in patient timing. Begin where I began, in the collapse of illusions. And listen, because the first rule is silence, and silence is never empty. Every betrayal has a rhythm. Every predator shows its teeth in silence first. I take you back to where it started. The dinners, the pauses, the carefully measured looks across a table that glimmered like a trap. She didn't speak in words at first. She spoke in glances, in the soft weight of a hand lingering just long enough to plant an anchor. She spoke in questions that seemed harmless but mapped the corners of my thinking. By the time I answered, she already knew what I would say. Maybe you've seen it too. You call it charm, warmth, interest. You think it's a thread binding you closer. It isn't. It's a snare spun from patience. She learned my pulse before I even spoke. She read the tempo of my breathing, the tilt of my head, the micro-hesitations that reveal where a man's walls are weakest. And I let her. That was my mistake. We met in the softest light, restaurants humming with quiet, her voice low enough to make me lean in. She spoke like someone offering refuge, but every detail was a probe. What do you fear most? She asked one night, laughing as if it were a joke. What do you want? She asked another, eyes wide, as if my answer was a secret worth guarding. I thought it was intimacy. It was reconnaissance. She disappeared sometimes. No warning. A text unanswered. A plan broken. Then she would return, vulnerable, eyes shimmering with some unspoken ache. It made me want to protect her. That was the point. Each absence taught me to crave her presence more. Each sudden return reset the hook deeper. This is the architecture of manipulation. Not direct attack, but rhythm. Closeness, withdrawal, closeness again, until you are no longer sure where you end and she begins. Looking back, the signs were obvious. Her timing was too precise, her indifference too rehearsed, her stories too perfectly broken. She mirrored my thoughts, my words, my gestures. Each reflection made me trust her more, but also made me depend on her without noticing. I was slowly bleeding in a war I didn't know had begun. The first psychological law, observation precedes control. She knew it. I didn't. Before you can move someone, you must see them. Before you can claim ground, you must draw its map. She had mapped me, my habits, my triggers, my silence. I was still walking blind. Advice for you. Map the terrain before you speak. Before you show your hunger, your wounds, your plans. She has already mapped you. Every glance you think is random is a question. Every pause is a calculation. You are giving her data with every reaction, and she's building a profile of you you don't even know exists. My trust began to collapse against her silent rehearsals. I started to feel the tug of something I couldn't name, the sense of being studied rather than seen. The dinners felt like interviews, the messages like scripts, her sudden disappearances like rehearsed exits in a play designed to test my responses. It was no longer affection. It was an experiment, and I was the subject. I tell you this because you need to feel the stage before the fight. Manipulation is never a single blow. It's scaffolding built in quiet hours. By the time you notice the trap, you're already inside it. But awareness changes everything. The real war begins not when you speak, but when you notice. When you stop answering automatically. When you see the rhythm. When you realize the smile across the table is not warmth, but measurement. That's the moment you step out of the script. That's the first break in her control. I wish I had seen it sooner. I wish I had mapped her as carefully as she mapped me. But scars are teachers. I learned late, but I learned. And now I can give you this. Slow your breathing, slow your reactions, and start drawing your own map. Because before you can win, you must see. Before you can act, you must observe. And before you speak, know who's listening and why. Silence is not surrender. It is a scalpel. It cuts away illusion, separates truth from performance, reveals what bleeds when you stop feeding the act. I let you inside my head now. Not the polished strategy you hear in lectures or see in diagrams, but the trembling interior of a man who has just realized he is a piece on someone else's board. You've felt it too, that stomach drop when the pattern finally appears. The conversations you thought were random form a net. The gestures you thought were kind fold into a trap. One day you blink and you are no longer a participant. You are prey being guided, nudged, studied. The first nights after I saw it were suffocating. My chest burned. My mind rehearsed confrontations I never spoke. I imagined slamming a glass on the table, accusing her, demanding explanations. I wanted to purge the ache with noise. But noise is a gift to a manipulator. It's data. It tells them where you still care. So I tried something different. I watched. At first, watching felt like drowning. Every instinct screamed to speak, to clear the air, to ask, why did you disappear? Why did you lie? Why do you act wounded after you wound me? But instead I stayed still. I let her provocations pass through me like smoke. My hands would clench under the table, but my face would stay calm. My heart would race, but my voice would slow, and something shifted. The second law revealed itself. Control begins where reaction ends. Reaction is a leash. The moment you tug, she knows which direction to pull. Stillness cuts the leash. Stillness turns you from an actor in her play into a mirror she cannot script. The signs came quickly. The first time I went quiet, instead of defending myself, she tilted her head, confused. She asked if I was angry. She smiled, then frowned, then smiled again, testing. Her sudden affection arrived when I withdrew. Her touch became urgent, her voice softer, as if she feared the silence more than my accusations. When I stayed still, her mask slipped. The flicker of irritation, the flash of panic. I began to feel my emotions fully but act like a mirror. Inside, I still hurt. The ache hadn't vanished. The shame was still raw. But on the surface, I became reflective, neutral, deliberate. She moved. I reflected. She provoked. I stayed steady. The more I practiced, the clearer her tactics became. Let me show you what that looked like. One evening, she arrived late, again. She didn't apologize. She launched into a story about being overwhelmed, about people misunderstanding her, about how much she needed someone to see her. It was the same story she had used to reel me in before. This time I listened without leaning forward. I nodded slow, nothing more. I did not offer comfort. I did not offer solutions. I simply held a space. Her eyes flickered. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. Silence. Another night she tried a different tactic, sudden anger. She accused me of being distant, of not caring. Before I would have explained myself, begged her to see how much I was giving. This time I let the accusation hang. I took a slow breath and said nothing. The anger burned out like a match deprived of oxygen. She stared at me, lost. This is the mirror. This is the discipline. Advice for you. Feel everything, show almost nothing. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your performance is. Let the feeling move through you privately. Show only what serves the moment. This is not suppression. This is strategy. Suppression hides from truth. Strategy uses truth. When you mirror instead of react, you gather information. You see the pattern without feeding it. The conflict inside me was fierce. My urge to confront was an animal pacing its cage. I wanted to shout, to demand, to make her see what she was doing. But I began to understand. Confrontation feeds the dynamic. Stillness starves it. Each time I resisted the urge to explain, I grew stronger. Each time I allowed silence to fill the space, her performance cracked. She began to overplay her hand. Her sudden affection became frantic. Her attempts at guilt sharper, less convincing. She started to reveal details she had once hidden. Small inconsistencies, contradictions, glimpses of her real motives. All because the script she had written for me no longer worked. This is the quiet power of observation. It isn't glamorous. It isn't cathartic. It feels like standing in a storm with your arms at your sides, refusing to run. But as the storm spends itself, you remain. I remember one night sitting across from her, the candle between us flickering. She reached for my hand. "Do you still love me?" she asked. In the past, I would have rushed to reassure her, to prove my devotion. This time I looked into her eyes and said nothing. She withdrew her hand. Her face twisted, searching for a new line, a new hook. None came. The silence between us became a blade she could not hold. In that moment, I felt the shift. My heart still ached, but my spine straightened. The shame began to evaporate. I realized I was no longer trapped in her rhythm. She was trapped in mine. Silence had begun to turn the power dynamic. You need to know this. Stillness is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is a scalpel. It cuts away the noise, exposes the pattern, and gives you the first taste of control. You will still feel pain. You will still feel the urge to react. But each time you hold your ground, the leash snaps a little more. Begin small. One less explanation. One unanswered provocation. One quiet breath before you speak. Watch what happens. Watch how the mask slips. Watch how the power shifts. Inside you will still tremble. That's natural. That's the sound of your old self dying. But hold the silence. Let it work. Let it teach you. Because control does not begin with force. It begins with the discipline to feel without feeding, to watch without performing, to wait without craving. And when you do, you'll notice something remarkable. The person who once seemed larger than life begins to shrink. Their tactics look transparent. Their power feels small. And you, the quiet one, begin to fill the room. That's where I found myself. Not triumphant, not yet free, but awake. The second law etched into my skin. Control begins where reaction ends. A man without a plan is a man already conquered. I'm not telling you this from a podium. This is not theory. This is a whisper in the dark between two people who have been bled by the same games. I break the fourth wall now. You and I sitting in the silence, the glow of a phone screen or a single lamp. You can almost hear the breath between my words. This is where survival becomes strategy, where instinct turns into a weapon, where you stop being the hunted and start writing the script yourself. I'll teach you 3 strategies. They are not tricks. They are not manipulations for sport. They are survival. They are the laws etched into my bones. First strategy, withdraw to starve her leverage. Her control lives in your reactions, your presence, your words. Each time you explain, justify, beg, or prove, you feed her leverage. Starve it. Withdraw quietly. Not as punishment, not as a tantrum. Withdraw as a man who knows the value of scarcity. When you vanish from the battlefield, her weapons swing at empty air. Her rehearsed accusations hit silence. Her demands find no answer. That's when you start to see who she really is. The signs are immediate. Her frantic attempts to re-establish the pattern will come like clockwork. More texts, softer apologies, sudden displays of affection, accusations of coldness, all of it designed to pull you back into the rhythm she controls. Resist, stay still. Each time you do, her leverage weakens. Second strategy, mirror her moves to reveal her intent. This is not mimicry to amuse. This is a diagnostic. She withdraws, you withdraw. She escalates, you escalate. Slightly. She withholds, you withhold. When you mirror, you create a reflection she cannot manipulate. Her tactics echo back at her, and in that echo, her intent becomes visible. The stories unravel, the motives surface. It's like holding a mirror to a predator. She sees herself and startles. Advice: do this without malice. Do it with discipline. You're not trying to win in a petty sense. You're trying to see clearly. Each mirrored move is a piece of data. Each mirrored pause is a test. Slowly, you map her true shape. Third strategy: introduce unpredictability to destabilize control. The third law: to gain power, reduce predictability. She has built a script for you. She knows when you'll call, how you'll respond, how you'll soothe her when she creates chaos. Break it. Answer at different times. Change your tone. Delay your responses. Alter your patterns. Not to confuse for cruelty's sake, but to dismantle the false security she's built on your predictability. Unpredictability is oxygen deprivation for manipulation. When the expected reaction doesn't arrive, she must reveal more, work harder, slip further. In that scramble, you see her real self, not the crafted mask. And you begin to choose your moves rather than play the part she wrote. Never give her the reaction she rehearsed. Create a new script instead. This is not about playing games. This is about reclaiming authorship of your life. Each unpredictable act is a small declaration. I am no longer prey. The conflict in me was sharp at this stage. My hunger for closeness still burned. I wanted the warmth, the softness, the story of love I had built in my head. But my need for command was louder now. I had tasted what it felt like to step out of the rhythm, to see her scramble when my silence arrived instead of my excuses. It was intoxicating and terrifying at once. I would sit at night staring at my phone, her messages stacking, my thumbs itching to respond. And then I would breathe, slow, and wait. That waiting was my weapon. That unpredictability was my first true act of power, and something began to shift. The game that had once felt like her stage began to feel like a chessboard where I held the clock. Each law, each strategy sharpened me a little more. Each time I withdrew instead of explaining, mirrored instead of reacting, disrupted instead of performing, I felt a piece of myself returning. This is where you need to be. This is where survival becomes sovereignty. When you stop feeding the script, when you stop being predictable, when you start designing your silence instead of drowning in it, the game starts shifting. I was no longer prey, not yet a predator, but something else entirely, a man who knew the terrain, the weapons, and the rules. Power is quiet until it becomes a storm. She felt it first. A subtle change in my presence, in my responses, in the space I allowed her to occupy. She could sense in ways she could not name that the rhythm had shifted. My silence no longer felt like compliance. It carried weight and tension. Her messages grew sharper, her gestures more desperate, each one a small spark against the tinder of anticipation I had carefully laid. The tension did not roar. It didn't scream. It built in the spaces between words, in the pauses of a conversation, in the glances neither of us dared to fully meet. I stayed deliberate, slow, unpredictable. Every reaction was measured, every withdrawal calculated. The room seemed to thicken around us. Every word she tried to throw at me was met with calm, reflective, almost absent acknowledgement. She started to overcompensate, testing boundaries she had once controlled effortlessly. We met one evening at a dimly lit cafe. The lights flickered, the world outside blurred, but inside it was silent, taut with expectation. She arrived smiling, a little too wide, too sharp. Her usual composure wavered. She touched my hand, then withdrew it almost immediately. "Why are you so quiet?" she asked. The question hung in the air like a blade. I did not answer, not yet, not ever when it would feed her control. Every glance became a question. Every silence became a blade. I could feel her assessing, recalibrating. She tried indirect tests, subtle digs at my pride, hints at jealousy, teasing remarks meant to elicit reaction. My replies were calm, almost distant. I mirrored her subtle moves only when it exposed her intent, never to feed it. Each time I did, I saw the flicker behind her eyes. A flash of panic, a miscalculation. That small panic was proof that the tide was turning. This is the fourth law: escalation without exposure. You must intensify the dynamic without revealing your hand. Do not shout to assert dominance. Do not explain to validate yourself. Intensify the effect through patience, precision, and absence. Let the other person escalate themselves. Let their desperation unfold like a candle burning from both ends. Signs appeared everywhere. She lingered longer than usual, testing my thresholds. She inserted herself into spaces she once left empty, checking for cracks. I stayed composed, deliberate, always just beyond reach. My calm replies, my measured gestures, and my quiet attentiveness became the contrast against which her growing frenzy was illuminated. Every frantic attempt she made to pull me back into the rhythm failed. She began to reveal herself not through words, but through tension, through missteps, through the cracks in her mask. Advice: maintain the facade. Let her destroy her own illusions. Do not correct her. Do not fill the gaps. Silence is not absence. It is the space in which power consolidates. She believes she is testing you, controlling you, She does not see that every move she makes tightens the web she is weaving around herself, not you. Her obsession rises even as my coldness grows. And that contrast, her heat, my ice, becomes the axis around which the dynamic spins. The air between us became almost unbearable. In one conversation, she accused me of being distant, of having changed. I said nothing, only let my eyes follow hers, quiet, deliberate. She pressed, leaning closer, her voice trembling. "I just don't understand what's happening." And I watched, still, silent, as the panic flickered across her features. She was unraveling herself without a word from me. Every attempt to regain control only pushed her further into desperation. Her obsession was a storm-gathering force. She mirrored her earlier tactics but amplified them. More attention, more affection, more demands. She assumed that if she could pull me in, she would reclaim the rhythm. But I had shifted. I did not chase. I did not explain. I did not react as she expected. My presence became gravity. My silence became weight. Every misstep she made became a revelation. Conflict roared inside me too, though differently. I still craved closeness, warmth, the echoes of connection we had shared. But the hunger was tempered by a deeper understanding. Closeness without command is surrender. The ice had to remain unbroken. My calm became a shield and a sword, allowing her storm to rage while I remained untouched. In the smallest details, the consolidation of power became evident. A subtle smile I withheld, a gaze I held, a word I delayed. Each act of discipline shifted the balance. She searched for cracks. She tried new strategies. Each one failed. Her obsession increased, but she had nowhere to attach it. She was climbing a ladder whose top had been removed. Power does not shout. It does not demand. It accumulates in silence, in patience, in the deliberate withholding of reaction. By the end of those weeks, I was no longer part of her world in the way I had once been. I was a constant, undeniable presence she could neither manipulate nor dismiss. The storm she carried inside herself raged in vain. I had become the calm at the center. The subtle panic in her eyes became my signal, the missteps in her rehearsed script my proof. Each time I held still, each time I reflected instead of reacting, the power shifted imperceptibly but irreversibly. The escalation without exposure had turned the tide. I did not fight. I did not chase. I allowed the dynamics to unfold and consumed the advantage quietly. By the time I realized it fully, the game had changed. She was no longer leading. She was unraveling herself against the law I had quietly written. My silence had become dominance. My calm had become strategy. And as I watched, I understood the cruel, beautiful truth. Power is quiet until it becomes a storm, and the storm is always within the one who holds it. Mercy is a luxury the betrayed cannot afford. The moment arrived not with fireworks or screams. It arrived quietly, like the pause before a storm, when the air holds its breath and the world seems to teeter on a knife's edge. She expected the old me, desperate, reactive, chasing, explaining. She anticipated the familiar rhythm of my heart betraying me in words, in gestures, in the tremor of impatience. She expected her stage to be filled with my compliance. Instead, she found someone she could not read. Someone whose voice did not flinch. Someone whose silence carried the weight of unspoken understanding and deliberate distance. The old scaffolding she relied on collapsed under the subtle pressure of my stillness. The game she thought she orchestrated became something else entirely. A mirror reflecting her own unraveling. The fifth law had revealed itself. Win without mercy, but without noise. The law is not about cruelty. It is about precision. It is about ending a cycle cleanly, decisively, without granting the satisfaction of protest or plea. The battlefield does not require shouting. It requires clarity and control. My withdrawal was total, meticulous, deliberate. Every word I refrained from saying, every text unanswered, every glance avoided, became a calculated instrument of liberation and authority. She tested me one last time. A message arrived late in the night, carefully crafted to sting. Words designed to provoke, to pull me back into her rhythm. I read it, felt the familiar pull of old emotions, the flash of desire to justify myself, to reach for tenderness in response to her need. And then I breathed. I did nothing. Not one word, not one sign of recognition. I allowed her effort to hang in the darkness, unanswered. Her facade began to crack. First, subtly. A hesitation in tone, a flicker of insecurity behind carefully rehearsed anger. Then more visibly, the tilt of her head, the narrowing of her eyes, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she typed another attempt. Every action she made was now exposed, raw, unshielded. The mask she had relied on for months was fracturing, revealing glimpses of frustration, confusion, and a hint of fear. She realized the script she had mastered no longer applied. Advice: end without explanation. Closure is control. Every sentence you do not speak, every confrontation you refuse, is a piece of dominion reclaimed. Mercy can be interpreted as weakness. Words can be twisted into justifications. You do not owe clarity. You owe only the unshakable execution of your choice. You do not defend the withdrawal. You embody it. Your absence speaks louder than any argument. I watched the last attempt to provoke me, to draw a reaction I would not give. I felt the residual ache of past tenderness, the warmth that had once guided me to her, the illusions of trust and intimacy I had nurtured. That ache is natural. It is human, but power requires discipline. Love, when betrayed, must be tempered with wisdom. The tender remnants of connection cannot override the law of self-preservation and sovereignty. Her messages grew fragmented, desperate, revealing her strategies like a puzzle stripped bare. She tried nostalgia, affection, subtle accusation. Nothing landed. Every attempt bounced against the wall of my deliberate stillness. She began speaking to the silence, addressing it as if it were a presence capable of recognition. And in that silence, the victory crystallized. The withdrawal itself had become the instrument of dominance. I did not shout. I did not threaten. I did not explain. I simply existed beyond her control. Conflict lingered in me. I still felt the faint tug of longing, the traces of care and admiration I had once held. Each heartbeat carried the echo of past tenderness. But I also felt the surge of clarity, the hard, beautiful edge of power reclaimed. To reconcile those opposing forces, the lingering warmth and the need to sever, required quiet courage. I allowed the tenderness to exist internally, while externally I manifested detachment. It was a paradox, soft inside, unyielding outside. That paradox became my armor, my strategy, my final law in action. She reached for closure, seeking recognition, demanding response. I offered none. Not as punishment, not as spite, as law, as clarity. The final test was not her fury or tears, but my ability to maintain complete stillness. And I did. Every instinct to justify, to soften, to explain, I held back. Every longing for intimacy, every whisper of connection, I contained. I had become the master of my own rhythm. The storm, once brewing inside me, had transformed into calm authority. The signs of victory were subtle but undeniable. Her agitation, her overcompensation, the erratic tone of her messages, they were proof that control had shifted. Where she had once dictated the pace, I now determined the tempo. Where she had once manipulated the rhythm, I now orchestrated absence. The law of quiet mastery had played out in full. Win without mercy, without noise, without spectacle. I walked away in silence. Not in defeat, not in anger, not in display. The world did not witness fireworks, nor did the night echo with protest. Only I moved, deliberate, composed, carrying the weight of lessons learned, of power reclaimed. Each step away was a reinforcement of authority, a declaration of sovereignty over self and circumstance. The withdrawal itself had rewritten the rules, reshaping the dynamic entirely. In this withdrawal, I discovered more than victory. I discovered the nature of control, the cost of betrayal, and the value of measured silence. The emotional landscape had not been erased. It had been transformed. What remained was clarity, a quiet authority that no plea or manipulation could penetrate. My power was no longer reactive. It was inherent, self-contained, unshakable. And she, who had once dictated the rhythm of my life, now faced the consequences of her own strategy. She had escalated, maneuvered, provoked, and tested. Each action had been countered, not with aggression, but with absence, not with noise, but with discipline, not with emotion, but with deliberate presence. She had forced her own collapse by expecting my old self, and I had delivered only the new, unreadable, unwavering, sovereign. The moment was complete. The reversal total, the rhythm broken, mercy withheld, noise absent, control absolute. I walked away, power reclaimed. Silence built me, strategy saved me. Now I give you the map. Sit with me here man to man. We've walked a long road together, through the shadows of betrayal, the corridors of observation, the quiet reversals that taught me more than any confrontation ever could. You've felt the tension with me, the ache of realization, the fire of restraint. You've seen the 5 ruthless strategies unfold, not as tricks, not as manipulations to flaunt, but as laws of survival, etched in the marrow of experience, tested in the arenas where trust falters and influence demands patience. Understand this: power does not arrive in grand declarations. It is cultivated in silence. It grows in the spaces where noise fails, where patience is sharper than any blade. Each step I took, each withdrawal, each mirror, each unpredictable move was a lesson in quiet mastery. It is the kind of mastery that feels almost invisible to the world, yet it is undeniable to anyone who dares to challenge you. The very fact that you feel this power inside, even now, is proof it is alive. Look back at yourself. Recall the moments you reacted too quickly, explained too often, gave too much weight to words that did not serve you. Those are your rehearsals of weakness. We all have them. Perhaps you've apologized when you should have observed. Perhaps you've explained when you should have waited. Perhaps you've allowed your desire to connect to be weaponized. Every misstep is a signpost, a reflection of the laws you have yet to internalize. Recognize them. Acknowledge them. Let them guide you, not define you. The first law, never fight where you can vanish instead, taught me that absence is a weapon far sharper than confrontation. It is easy to react. It is hard to step back and let the other person reveal themselves through their own efforts. The spaces you create, the silences you preserve, are the ground on which control grows. Each retreat is not defeat. It is recalibration. Each absence is a claim of territory in a landscape where visibility is often mistaken for authority. The second law, control begins where reaction ends, revealed the power of stillness. I discovered the discipline of observation, the luxury of reflection, the quiet thrill of seeing a manipulator overreach while I remained unmoved. Emotional fire, when unchecked, feeds chaos. Emotional mastery, when practiced, yields command. The difference between reacting and observing is the difference between being a player on someone else's board and placing your own pieces strategically. The third law, to gain power, reduce predictability, sharpen my instincts. Life is a rhythm of expectation. Manipulation thrives on rhythm. Disrupt it. Alter your patterns. Introduce unpredictability not for spectacle, but for clarity. Each deviation from the expected reveals intentions and weaknesses that were invisible before. When you no longer perform according to their script, you strip manipulators of the advantage they rely upon. The fourth law, escalation without exposure, taught me the subtlety of intensifying dynamics while preserving my own invisibility. You do not shout to assert authority. You do not strike to prove dominance. You escalate in silence. You let the other party accelerate themselves into missteps while you remain the constant, the calm center. Her desperation became my tool, not my torment. The power that comes from watching another scramble while you remain composed is the closest thing to absolute control a man can experience. The fifth law, win without mercy, but without noise, was the final revelation. It was not about cruelty. It was not about gloating. It was about decisiveness. It was about withdrawal so complete, so deliberate, that the other person's control fractured by their own overextension. Closure is control. Silence is power. You leave no gaps for negotiation, no room for argument, no opportunity for manipulation. Every act of restraint is a claim of sovereignty over yourself and the circumstances. Internalize these laws. Practice them until they are instinct, until your reactions are no longer dictated by the impulses of desire, fear, or longing. Do not announce your strategy. Do not justify your choices. Move without sound. Let your presence, your timing, your absence speak louder than any declaration. The temptation to return to noise will appear. It always does. You will feel the pull of words you wish to say, explanations you feel compelled to offer, the craving for immediate resolution. Do not give in. Discipline is cultivated in the refusal to react. Mastery grows in the patience to hold the storm inside, allowing the world to misread your calm while you quietly determine the outcome. Notice your own patterns now. The habits of reaction, the rehearsals of weakness, the impulsive gestures that have betrayed you in the past. Each is a signpost, a lesson waiting to be transformed. The moment you see them clearly, you can begin to apply the laws, step by deliberate step, until the silent power becomes inseparable from your presence. I leave you with this. Silence is not emptiness. It is not passive. It is the forge upon which your strength is tempered. Strategy is not coldness. It is clarity. Observation is not weakness. It is the prelude to command. Each of these elements combined forms a foundation upon which influence, authority, and control can be quietly but unmistakably built. When you walk into a room now, when you respond or choose not to respond, when you observe rather than react, you carry the sum of everything we have walked through together. You have seen the patterns, learned the rhythms, experienced the withdrawals, the mirrors, the unpredictability, the escalation, and the ultimate quiet reversal. And if you follow these laws, you will know what it means to move through the world untouchable, deliberate, and sovereign in a way others cannot predict or manipulate. And so I leave you with one final question, a challenge to carry forward. When silence is your power, what will your first move be? The map is in your hands now. The laws are written in experience, etched into observation and restraint. Your choices determine how the next stage unfolds. Will you act or will you wait? Will you reclaim your rhythm or continue to dance to another's script? The answers are yours, forged in the quiet strength of deliberate mastery. Remember, man to man, power whispered is louder than any scream. Strategy saved me. Now it will save you.